Welcome to inPractice by Getzy Dental. We believe the best patient care is delivered in the private practice, so 100% of our energy and resources will continuously center on the products and services we offer to the privately held dental practice through integrity, education, innovation, and customer service. We stand united with the artists, the scientists, and the explorers of the dental community whose interest in providing exceptional patient care never fades. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of inPractice. Digital communication has become increasingly important for the dental practice in recent years, and is proving itself to be a valuable tool in adapting to changes in patient flow as a result of the 2020 coronavirus pandemic. In this webinar, Mike Lynch of RevenueWell walks through teledentistry tools for virtual visits, how to go paperless and digitize patient information intake with RevenueWell forms, the completely integrated web phone system, and building custom campaigns to send your patients relevant and personalized communication. We hope you find this valuable. If you'd like to learn more, please visit www.getzydental.com/RevenueWell.
So what I was saying, as far as you can see recent conversations, you can start to type a patient's name in and you can see it starting to populate from the database of patients that we have. So if I wanted to send communication, it's really easy. There's a couple ways, like I just mentioned, that we can use this to our advantage, especially if we're starting to open up and practices are, like most that I'm speaking to, having the waiting room be essentially a waiting room in the parking lot where we're waiting in our cars. It's difficult to reach out to patients and let them know, hey, operatory 1 is open, or it's your turn for your hygiene appointment, or whatever it might be, even for the emergency patients. And of course, we could make a phone call, but a lot of patients, they do prefer that quick and instant communication via text. So this allows you to communicate with your patients and send that, not just a reminder, but to really send them, hey, this is what we'd like you to do. We can go over this in a second, as well as the ability to copy a form and to send that form over to them as well. So if they're a new patient, they can still fill out all of their new patient paperwork with RevenueWell's form product. And if they're an existing patient, we can use it to create COVID-19 templates and our COVID-19 questionnaires and have them fill them out before they come in the office. We're not passing around a clipboard, trying to limit the amount of exposure we all have to others. And you know, a lot of practices have been using the messenger platform specifically for that. Now, there are two other functions here that are going to be really helpful for staying remote as well. And these were launched, Steve, I think right around 30 to 45 days ago, if that sounds right. But the ability to make and receive phone calls through RevenueWell. So you can see at the bottom, there's a web phone number. This won't be your practice number. It's really not intended to be. It's intended to be a way to communicate with patients through the phone, but not have to provide your personal phone number, whether that's office manager, front desk, or doctor. You know, sometimes you want to keep that information private, especially if you're, you know, an office manager who's working remote for the first time. You still want to be able to make and receive phone calls, but not necessarily be on your personal cell phone all day. So this allows you to use the web phone number. You can have your existing phone line forward here so that all incoming calls do come through this platform. You get a screen pop because of our sync. So the screen pop is going to be helpful in showing, you know, what do we have as far as content and information from that patient. It's going to show you if that patient, when they call, if they're past due for recall, if they have an outstanding balance, if they have an upcoming birthday. So RevenueWell's continuously pinging and syncing with your practice management software to pull the information we know is really important and provide it to you at the appropriate time. So for web phone, pretty straightforward as far as making a call. You just have to start typing in your phone number, and you can make a call through your computer, and vice versa, or conversely, I should say, you can receive phone calls as well. So it's not super, you know, complicated. It does give you a call history. It does give you the ability to have voicemails as well. So if we're using this web phone feature, but we're not at our desk, we're taking our lunch, you can still not have to worry about, you know, missing calls. All the functionality you know, expect from a phone system, web phone's going to provide. So web phone, that's how we communicate on the phone. But as we know, teledentistry is starting to become pretty important pretty quickly. I think we're all, especially in this industry, scrambling to kind of figure out how does this work and what does it look like. And thankfully, RevenueWell launched a virtual visit option as part of our virtual office and RevenueWell core product to be able to handle that exact situation. So to kind of show you an example, all you'd have to do if a patient has a question and you want to do some teledentistry, maybe they aren't sure if it's an emergency, but they want to kind of talk to you and ask and say, hey, is this something that I need to come in now, or is it something that we can wait? It's really easy to start a virtual visit. This is my personal cell phone, but you normally just see your patient's information. Maybe you're having a communication via text through our messenger and you want to start a virtual visit. It's really easy to click this button, and what it's going to do is send a text message to your patient. The patient is then prompted with a text message, and all it's really going to ask them to do is click. They don't have to make any accounts. They don't have to log in, and you're going to have the ability to essentially have a one-to-one HIPAA-compliant consultation with video and audio. So this has been extremely helpful for patients, like I mentioned, that are questioning whether or not they have an emergency. Depending on your state, it's certainly something that's billable as well. I know the ADA has suggested going to your state board and figuring out how teledentistry is typically or in the future going to be coded, but this is a wonderful resource if we're still a little reluctant or hesitant to come into the office, but we do have questions and we do want to speak to doctor and have some consulting. So I think in the first day, Steve, if I'm right, we did 1,000 virtual visits in the first day that we launched this, and that was, I want to say, almost 2 months ago. So I can only imagine the amount of virtual visits that the RevenueWell customers that are using it have made so far, but I know it's been a tremendous success. Just, if anything, just reaching out and having that face-to-face conversation with our patients and letting them know we're still there and being a resource and just giving them some peace of mind for sure as well. So that pretty much covers, how do we stay connected as far as the messenger platform. To hop into RevenueWell itself, we certainly have the ability to do a couple different things here as well. So our forms product is certainly another aspect of, what do we do now that we don't have waiting rooms and we can't have patients filling out their forms on a piece of paper on a clipboard because we don't want to pass that around. So RevenueWell's forms product, which just hit its 2-year launch anniversary a few weeks ago, is a great way to not only go paperless, which is great, and to have a pretty quick sync with your existing practice management software, but also send this to patients while they're in their car waiting outside, or even when they're at home. We have a couple different ways that you can fill these forms out, but the nice thing is that now we're going to reduce the contact that we have with patients and things that we don't really need contact with. So, for example, a health history form, we might have a patient we've seen for 10 years and they're coming in now that we're opening back up, and you want to send them a health history form. It's really as simple as copying the link and then in Messenger sending them that specific form. So the patient's going to get a link to go to. They don't have to sign in. Again, the goal is not to make this any difficult or to have any hurdles for patients to fill this stuff out. They're just going to begin logging all their information in and clicking, signing and submitting it. And they can do that through any device that we send that link to, whether it's a tablet, whether it's going to be their computer, their cell phone. It's all responsive design, so the forms are going to conform to any platform that they're looking at it, and just make it that much easier. So once it's sent out, you're actually going to get a notification when the patient does fill that form out in our forms tab. So the patient's filled it out, and you can, depending on workflow, certainly take this as a sign to text them back and say, thanks for filling that out. You're now please go to operatory 4 or whatever the next step might be. But this way we can handle all the administrative tasks we need to without necessarily interacting with the patients yet. So, forms are great. I love the fact that we have a solution that lets practices go paperless, just being a tech savvy kind of guy and preferring everything being digital. But, ironically enough, being tech savvy has really been pretty helpful for RevenueWell, given that we're going to leverage that to keep ourselves distanced and to at least have some policies in place and things in place to continue operating as a practice should and would hope to in the new normal that we have now. So yeah, there's a bunch of different ways and workflows that we can kind of go through as far as how does virtual office help your practice communicate with patients during this time, but those would probably be the majority ways or the most common ways that I've seen practices use RevenueWell lately. I didn't know if we wanted to necessarily stop here for any questions as far as the virtual office. You know, there's certainly aspects of RevenueWell as far as automatic communication and how we can help drive revenue and bring new patients into the door by increasing online presence and helping with treatment plan and post-op instructions, all that fun stuff. But Steve, you let me know what you think works best here.
You know, we'll allow them to absolutely ask any questions that you do have on the side chat there. Mike, I don't want to interrupt you. I am also going to launch a poll, which will ask what patient communication platform you're using now. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, if you have any questions in regards to the messenger platform with the video, with the texting, the phone call, anything like that, please feel free to ask. Mike's going to dive into the marketing platform, which will include the appointment reminders and some other cool things. And so as he does that, feel free to ask any questions that you have.
Cool, perfect. So yeah, this is the dashboard of RevenueWell. And we are cloud-based, as you'd imagine. So everything that we looked at here, in fact, from the messenger perspective, is all on this side here on the left side. So just due to the way that our demos are set up, I have to open it in a different tab, but you'd actually be living in one tab, not bouncing around to different windows, which makes the workflow that much easier. On the home screen, because we're synced with your existing practice management software, there's a lot of different things that we're going to be able to do. And I think the first thing I always point out is the RevenueWell stats. Big thing for us is being month to month with no contract. And really what that means for RevenueWell is that we have to earn your business every month. And the only way we can really do that is to show you what we've kind of accomplished and what we've helped bring to the table. So whether that's a dollar figure, and here you can see the total value that RevenueWell's provided. Maybe it's, hey, we want to grow and need new patients, so we can show you how many new visits we've helped bring in. Messages sent, appointments confirmed, reviews collected. We try to stay as transparent as possible. I kind of consider this the RevenueWell report card. You know, come in here every month and see what we've helped contribute. I know the ROI that we recently audited at the end of 2019, as far as what was the average ROI from practices using RevenueWell, and it's 18 times what we cost. So I know if someone were to offer me 18 times ROI on my investment, I'd be thrilled. I think most people would. So what we're trying to do is just show you, obviously we put revenue in front of our name for a reason. That's certainly a big part of what we're trying to do, aside from, you know, really giving you a communication tool that lets you kind of grow your practice. We understand the financial side of it as well, and we want this to be an asset more than anything. So I always like to point that out. I'll click on the appointments tab here, and really this is the schedule for the day. And what it allows you to do is not only see who's coming in, which is nice, of course, but also confirmation status. What communication attempts were made? So you can see here, Lisa's unconfirmed, but you can see that we did send 2 emails and she read both of them. So this is just kind of an assurance for you and the staff that, hey, this patient did get the communication from RevenueWell. For whatever reason, they didn't confirm. This just kind of lets you know there wasn't a mistake as far as communication being sent out. Now, Lisa might prefer text, and we can talk about how she can change her communication preferences and make sure that text is the preferred method for appointment reminders. But you kind of have an overview of what communications are being sent out. The other thing that I really love is the alerts. So the ability for patients to, or excuse me, for practices to see not only who's coming in and their confirmation status, but is there anything important that we need to address? So Angela has an overdue balance. We probably want to bring that up. There are patients that are going to have missing information. That are not on recall. Maybe Josh came in because he had an emergency, but you know, because of our sync with your practice management software, we know that he's not on recall. Maybe that's part of the problem. So we can address these things with the patient when they come in. You know, obviously I'm speaking to some of this in a world where we are having patients come into the waiting room and we're talking to them face to face. So I know some of this won't be applicable for the near future, but just going forward, and you know that RevenueWell is going to provide you information that helps kind of drive that conversation. And more importantly, at least for me, someone who's very forgetful, it's tough to remember every little detail of a patient's file, I'm sure, and probably an impossible task in reality. So we're just going to try to leverage our sync to let you know anything that's really important for the practice. You're also going to see the appointment requests up here. So RevenueWell has a couple different platforms and areas that patients can request an appointment. Obviously, pretty important nowadays. I think most people are, at least in the younger demographic, are reluctant to pick up the phone. They don't make phone calls too often. So this is a way, whether it's through your website, through any email communication, through Facebook, that patients can request appointments. You would see all those appointment requests pop up here. And I'm actually going to go to our settings tab. So RevenueWell, an appointment reminder system, patient communication. There's a bunch of different names. I prefer patient communication, but there's no doubt that appointment reminders and the ability to confirm appointments is really I always say it's the most basic but most important feature with RevenueWell. This has to work flawlessly. This has to be it's the hardest working campaign that we have, and really it's going to send out email, text, and phone call options to your patients to confirm appointments, especially when we're starting to go back. If you don't have a system in place, this is extremely beneficial because we're going to have maybe 10 to 20 even. I've had practices 40, 50 patients a day they see. Just thinking about the amount of phone calls that would require to confirm appointments. Even if we get lucky and every single patient answers the phone the first call. But we know the reality is a lot of practices are going to be leaving voicemails. Some patients just prefer text messaging. So we have a couple different ways that you can customize the reminders. Pretty straightforward if you're familiar with patient communication. The save the date reminder goes out to patients when you schedule their appointment. So whatever platform you're in, whatever practice management software you use, when there's a new appointment with a patient, they're going to get an email and a save the date. That save the date is pretty straightforward. It's a digital version of the magnet or business card you might hand them today. I used to get a magnet from my dentist. I always put it on my fridge. But this is probably something that most patients would prefer nowadays. If you're a Google Calendar user like myself, I can one-click add it so that I don't forget. And that's really the important aspect, is we're trying to at least give them the opportunity to put it on their calendar so that it's not a surprise when it does come up in 6 months. And then the reminders, there's really three. There's a first reminder, a second reminder, and a same day reminder. And the idea here is, we want to reach out to patients with enough time to reschedule if necessary, depending on what your workflow is. So I'd say the most common setting for practices is to reach out the first time, maybe 5 to 7 days before their appointment. But you can customize anything with RevenueWell. So that's really the beauty of it. You don't have to have RevenueWell, or you don't have to conform to RevenueWell. RevenueWell really is going to try to conform to your practices as much as we can. So give you that ability to say, okay, I want to do 7 days, and maybe a couple of weeks later, you're like, you know what, let's make it 5. That was a little too much leeway to give patients. We want to send it out for all unconfirmed appointments, of course. Really, the delivery method is what's most important, and the two options I recommend are the two bottom ones here, which is to say, we're going to send a text message as our default communication. Now, if a patient doesn't have a cell phone, we can send an email. If they have neither, we can send them an automated phone call. So this way, the only patients that won't get appointment reminders are those that have no phone number stored and no email address stored. I don't think many practices have any patients without any sort of contact information. So this should cover 100% of your patients and give them the ability to confirm this appointment remotely from their home, which is obviously a pretty important thing now. These reminders go out. For example, here's what an email looks like, and I have two options available. I should say too that this email is going to be customized with your practice logo and information as well. So it's going to look like it's coming directly from your office, but the two options available are confirm appointments and please call me. Confirm does exactly what you think it does. It's going to confirm in your practice management software, so you don't have to check and see, did this patient confirm? If you're just used to looking in Edson or Dentrix RegalSoft, you're going to see that patient's confirmed. Now, if a patient has a question or clicks this button, please call me, what it does is alert your office. You get a little alert in RevenueWell, and it's going to kind of let you know that this patient's requested a call. Now, they might have a question. They might have a reschedule need. Especially with COVID-19, I anticipate that button's going to be used a lot because I might want to know, well, what happened with updated procedures? Is there things that I have to be prepared for going forward? And most likely there is. So this is a way to at least let the patient raise their hand and let you know as a practice, I have a concern or question. They can't cancel or reschedule through RevenueWell, so we're never going to give them that ability. So it's nice to at least give them the option to kind of flag it, so to speak, without taking anything off the schedule by any means. So first reminder goes out. Ideally, every patient confirms their appointment. In a perfect world, I'm sure there's going to be some days when you send out 20 and 20 patients confirm, and that's great. But the reality is we know not every patient is going to confirm their appointment, right? They either won't see the text message, they are still kind of debating, whatever it might be, we haven't heard a response back. The second reminder is really important in doing that. And what I always recommend, of course you can customize this, but 2 days before the appointment, let's send a second reminder. That way we know on any given day, if it's, for example, Tuesday, everyone for Wednesday's appointments has gotten 2 reminders from RevenueWell. So if you're still not confirmed and it's Tuesday morning and it's for Wednesday appointments, that would be the next step would be, I think, to make a phone call, to try to personally reach out to the patients, because we've tried twice. We don't want to necessarily continue pestering them by any means, but there's obviously a lack of response, and most practices, I think, will at that point make a phone call and leave a voicemail. But the idea is, for the second reminder, let's get all the stragglers, so to speak, that haven't scheduled or confirmed their appointment, and the vast majority of patients are going to be confirmed by the time the second reminder gets sent. So second reminder goes out, everyone's confirmed at that point, great. We know if people need to reschedule already, we don't have to worry about that. And then the same day reminder, it's optional. Some practices do turn it off, but I think it's a great way to, a few hours before the appointment, let the patient know we look forward to seeing them. It's not giving them any confirmation attempts. It's not giving them any please call me. It's simply an email or text that says we look forward to seeing you, and it says the patient's appointment date and time. So this is just great if sometimes, I've confirmed my appointment, but I got really busy at work and wasn't sure what, or totally forgot that I had my my appointment later this afternoon. This is a great way for those forgetful patients to have that last second reminder so they don't no-show, which obviously causes all sorts of headaches. So same day reminders you can turn off, but I recommend keeping them on. And this way you have 3 different reminders in place for your patients. If you're not using a system now, the confirmation percentage I would always expect to go up tremendously. Not only go up and be a little bit higher, but also not rely on staff members having to call and leave voicemail, and kind of go through the schedule every day and make all those phone calls. RevenueWell is just going to be operating in the background, really doing all the heavy lifting, so to speak. And that's kind of a theme with RevenueWell. Let RevenueWell do the heavy lifting, right? We want it to be a second pair of hands for the staff, and we want it to do the things that sometimes it's not a priority, and sometimes it's really hard to do everything in one day. We know how busy the office can be, and we know that it's really difficult to focus on all the different things that we have to do in a given day. So RevenueWell is trying to take some of that burden and say, hey, let's automate some tasks and make sure that you're reaching out to patients based on them reaching back out to you. So I've clicked on the campaigns tab here, and it's really where most of RevenueWell's features are located as far as the ability to reach out to your patients. The custom campaigns here is really a marketing toolbox. It's a way to reach out to patients via email and text and group them based on all sorts of different filters. So I'm going to click create a campaign here, but the sky's the limit as far as how you can use this resource. You can see we have templates broken down. So if I wanted to send patients a new teeth whitening special that we're running, or if I wanted to talk about a new piece of office technology or a newsletter, we can send that update to patients. Now, as you'd imagine, COVID-19 is kind of at the forefront of the communication we're sending. So we added a bunch of COVID-19 templates to reach out to your patients. And it depends on, what we're trying to send. I think, as you'd imagine, updated procedures is a pretty important one that we're sending now. A lot of patients are eager to come back, but they don't know exactly what procedures might have changed, and their normal of what to expect in the office is certainly going to be different for many. So we have a few different templates in place: updated hours, office reopening. I know a lot of practices are extremely excited to send this one out once their practice can open. And this is a great way to let patients know that. So these emails are all very professionally written and they look great, but they're also customizable. So you can see here, lets patients know that they're open. You even can see insert new policy or procedures here. So we would like you and prefer you to kind of let the patient know what specifically for your practice should they expect coming in for their appointment. So you're able to change this. It's just like you would change on any document you've ever edited. You just come in here and you can put links and pictures and all sorts of things and really make it your own. The power behind custom campaigns, however, comes from the filtering options, in my opinion. Who do we send this out to? So maybe we want to send our new procedures or the fact that we're opening to all patients. Well, that's pretty easy. We can click all patients and send this out. But maybe we want to send updated procedures to patients that are coming in next week. So we can say, you know what, I just want to send this to patients that are coming in next week. So I'm going to select, I got to look at the calendar, I'm forgetting my days here, the 11th through the 15th. So now, and I can hit updated results. You would see an updated result here. I have 2 patients in my demo environment, it looks like, but you'll get an updated result so you can kind of see how many patients is this actually going to go out to. And that's really where the power of the custom campaign comes in. I don't necessarily want to send this to all patients right now. Maybe updated procedures aren't relevant for patients that don't have their next appointment until October. Maybe you want to send it to everyone. We just really want to give you that ability to kind of figure out and target who we really think is important to communicate with, because that way the communication becomes that much better, right? If we have targeted communication, it's always better than a blanket email. Now, there's all sorts of different ways you can filter here, and COVID-19 and not using COVID-19. There's different, I guess, goals that we might have using a communication, this sort of campaign. Now, we can filter by recall status, different insurance carriers, patients that don't have insurance or patients that have insurance benefits remaining, but they're expiring in the next 6 months. Different zip codes, different dental conditions. We also have the ability, we're the only software that's going to pull dental codes. So we have the ability to look into proposed treatment plans, and especially if we're trying to do some revenue generation. I know a lot of us have, we've been closed and don't have the ability to generate revenue for the past 60 days or even longer. So I know a lot of practices that I've spoken to are like, yeah, we certainly have some things that we want to take care of as far as getting our patients scheduled, but we also would love a way to start generating revenue. So let's reach out to patients that have been proposed services but haven't accepted in the last 6 months. And I can really just select all, and any patient that's had any procedure can get this communication, but I can also really, really hyper target and say, I just want to reach out to patients that have been proposed to crown. You can type in keywords here. You don't have to know the codes, thankful for me, because I don't know any. And you can really fine tune who we're reaching out to and what procedures we want to reach out for. So this is a great way, especially now, I think, if we want to just select all, this is going to be all the codes that we have the ability to read in the last 6 months. Maybe patients were anticipating to schedule this appointment, but COVID-19 shut everything down. It was elective. Now let's reach out and let them know, not only are we open, here's our updated procedures. If you were putting off an elective procedure, let's get it scheduled today. So that way we can start getting those patients in that we know have been waiting. Obviously, of course, handling the hygiene appointments as well. RevenueWell wants to give you just kind of a kickstart to communicating with those patients and letting them know it's time to kind of come back. So custom campaigns, there's a million different ways to show this. As you can see, there's so many different filtering options based on what you really would like to do. But these are some of the common ways I've seen practices use it in the past, and certainly use it going forward with COVID-19. So custom campaigns, kind of a manual process for sure. We have to come in and send this communication out. We'll always track effectiveness. So, you'll get a snapshot view of how much communication did we send, how many visits came in a dollar figure perspective. So going back to that, sending it out to patients that have elective services proposed, we certainly can track the revenue associated with that campaign and see how effective it is. But the same goes for the bottom part here, which is the automatic communications. And this really is the ability for you to set up communications that run in the background. It's really the backbone of RevenueWell. And once you set this up once, you really don't have to come in here and tweak it ever if it's working effectively. I think most practices don't make too many changes to this once it's originally set up. And that's really that's the goal. Certainly, you don't have to worry about whether or not we're sending birthday messages. RevenueWell certainly is going to send an email on a patient's birthday. And some of this is overlap with communication systems you might be using today. And that's intentional. We don't want you to miss out on anything that you truly love or truly depend on. So, holiday messaging, of course, 4th of July is probably the next one coming up. We're going to send out communication then. But RevenueWell really sets itself apart from things like expiring insurance benefits reminders. We know that a lot of practices in the fall are going to sometimes come in on a Saturday and say, hey, let's pull the patients that have benefits remaining. Let's send a postcard and let them know that they have benefits remaining, or even just generating a report and calling a list. There's a couple different ways that practices have typically done this, and RevenueWell is always trying to figure out, can we automate this process so that we can at least remind patients that they have benefits remaining, or at least remind them that we have something worth sharing, I should say. So automation is key here. You can see 4 months before insurance benefits expire. Most of the time that's year end, as we know. If you're a teacher and it ends in the June or July, we're going to adapt for that as well. So you don't have to necessarily, we're not going to assume it's year end insurance. We're going to read in your practice management software when that insurance expires. And then who do we send it out to? Well, patients who have a certain amount of benefits remaining. This is probably going to be pretty important come this year end, because a lot of patients haven't had their appointment that they normally would have. At least a good chunk of the population will have missed a hygiene appointment. So this is a good way to say, hey, those benefits are still out there. If it's something that we've avoided, especially at year end, I would certainly hope optimistically that we're back to normal by year end. But you can say, you know what, I don't want to reach out to patients that have like $20 left. Maybe I want to only reach out to patients who have $150 left. Whatever your hygiene appointment usually costs is what we recommend, just because that way the patient gets an email, wants to schedule, and doesn't have to pay out of pocket. So click save here. The email won't actually say the number specified, because we know that there is a chance that a patient has seen a specialist or another practice and the insurance info isn't going to be as accurate as we would like it to be. We're only going to pull whatever's in your practice management software. So what we do is essentially let them know that you have unused benefits and that they're going to be lost if you don't use them. So this way, as a practice, anyone who's received this email should have a certain amount of benefits remaining, but the patient only knows that it's a number and it's best to call and kind of schedule that appointment, especially if you've been postponing treatment. But this just runs in the background. It usually goes out every fall. We'll see at RevenueWell side, we'll just see, I don't know the number, but I'm sure it's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of communication going out from just that campaign alone. It's usually not being used at a time like now because insurance benefits, of course, aren't expiring. But it is a great way, a peace of mind to say my patients are getting communication when it's necessary. We're not letting anybody slip through the cracks. Now, that's a great way to generate revenue, there's no doubt. And, we're going to track that revenue for you and show you how effective the communication was. Conversely, post-op instructions, I think one of our coolest features, one of the most helpful ways that we can communicate, but it's not designed to generate revenue. And it's pretty straightforward. What we're doing is using our ability to read dental codes and allowing RevenueWell to communicate with your patient after their appointment. So I might come in for a crown. We know the codes associated with a crown. when you're walking the patient out, you can let them know, hey, we'll email you a copy of your post-op, especially now if we're going to avoid handing patients a piece of paper with post-op instructions. RevenueWell is going to digitize that and send it to your patient automatically. So you can see the schedule is immediately after the appointment, delivery method is email, and for the following services, we're going to send a Crown-specific post-op instruction. The nice thing is that you can customize this. So I can hit edit message, and I can copy and paste the template I might be using today for crowns. So you're free to use our templates. Everything is pre-written, but you can also customize this. I've seen practices make a YouTube video where doctor gives a general post-op instruction rundown specific to procedures. So, crowns and bridges and extraction and whatnot. It just makes one video. You can link it here in the template. That way the email is going to have a video post-op as well as the words here, the template here. So sky's the limit. You can really go as in-depth as you want, or just use our templates. I'd say most practices just use the post-op instructions that we have here. But it's a great way to digitize this, have this just work with your workflow. You're not going to have to send this email out. For someone like me, I've gotten my wisdom teeth pulled a decade ago, more now, and I did lose my post-op instruction, and I had to have my sister go in, and she drove to the office because I had gone under for it, and she had to pick up a new copy. This is before we were really so prevalent with email. But if I had just had that on my phone right next to me when that procedure was done, it would have been that much more helpful for me. So we know most people have a phone within arm's reach of them at all times. I know I do. You're going to have those post-ops sent to those patients after their appointments, which again isn't really going to generate any revenue, but it's designed to avoid having a patient call in and say, hey, can you send me a copy of that? And then staff has to go and send an email. RevenueWell is just going to automate that process entirely. So we're the only software company that's going to pull those codes and use them in certain ways. Post-op instructions, custom campaigns, two of the biggest areas we help, especially now treatment plan follow-up is going to be one of the flagship features of RevenueWell. And this allows us to use that ability, but to specifically go after patients that aren't scheduling their treatment. So if a patient comes in, you propose treatment and they're not accepting for whatever reason, especially now, there's kind of a built-in excuse, right? Unfortunately, I think with so much unknown, there's a good chance that some patients might use that as an excuse, or they might be a legitimate excuse, of course, and say, hey, I don't want to schedule this treatment right now. And for the most part, practices are going to call off of a list to remind patients about that. The reality is we want to give them something personalized, and we want to give them something automatic. We don't necessarily want to have to send this out every day, every time we propose treatment, but we know how important it can be to reach out to those patients. So I would recommend waiting a few days until after their proposed treatment. So it says a day here, a day after treatment plan's been created, we want to send out communication. I'd say 3 to 5 days is usually best. Give them some time to digest. And when you do save this, you can see here the email is going to be the most effective form of communication because we're attaching a summary of your treatment plan below. So this isn't a generic, you have treatment schedule, which I think doesn't really do much other than kind of, waste a patient's time. We want to let them know, hey, this is your treatment plan. This is what we talked about. Oftentimes patients are going to be pretty fearful going to the dentist. We know that, and they might be very forgetful. And when they come home, they forgot what, they talked about with doctor, and we understand how that can be. And, we maybe want to make an informed decision with your partner. I know, if I was proposed a crown and it cost $1,000, I'm going to get that scheduled, but I definitely want to discuss it with my fiance and just kind of go over like what happened and when can we take care of this, and just make sure our finances are in order. This is a great way to have a resource that not only shows specifically what procedures were proposed, but also let me click on videos and click here to read more and really educate myself. This is educational content more than anything. And this is really what we strive to do with this campaign, is educate the patient, and in turn, they're more likely to schedule. We've had this feature for a long time. I want to say almost the entire existence of RevenueWell, and it's been extremely effective at increasing case acceptance for patients, for practices, I should say. So this is going to kind of operate autonomously in the background, and patients will reach out. They'll ask questions. They'll send you a text. They'll call to schedule their appointment. You know, we're always, the call to action is always request an appointment or call. But with RevenueWell's treatment plan follow-up, it's, you know, if we can bring in just a crown type appointment or procedure a month, we're going to pay for ourselves almost 3 times over. So that's what we've started to see as far as how effective we can be, not only at communicating with patients, giving them educational resources, but also generating revenue for your practice. You know, this campaign goes out up to 5 times. You might think that's too many. That's okay. We can turn these off. The idea is between proposing treatment and their next hygiene appointment, we want to have consistent communication, especially if they have treatment. So this campaign, of course, super customizable as far as schedule, but it runs in the background. And really what I would do is, you know, track it from here. How many communications are we sending out? How many visits came in? I can even click on the visits here and get an in-depth breakdown as far as what patients were scheduling and what they came in for. So you can see the date and time of the visit and go, okay, what did Matt come in for? $1,000. Okay, here's the 2 procedures he came in for. So you can see, wow, this is effective at getting my patient scheduled. I can literally see the amount billed. We want to give you as much transparency and insight into the communication we send, as well as their outcomes, so you know how effective they really are. That's one of our goals too, is show you all the numbers we can, show you all the data we can, so you can see what some of the trends are. And sometimes you want to make an adjustment. You know what, maybe treatment plan follow-up, we want to send an additional communication. 3 isn't enough. It's really effective, but let's see what happens when we make 4 emails as part of the campaign, and you might see a spike in visits and revenue as well. So you can kind of tweak those settings. RevenueWell has unlimited training and support, so you're always going to be able to reach out to us and ask any questions. We'll be more than happy to do a deep dive with you and make sure you're using it effectively. But you know, suffice to say, once you get things set up, you're going to start to see these revenue numbers jump and these visit counts jump as well, which is really our intended goal with automatic communication. I do want to quickly show too, just reviews. I know how important they can be, especially for online presence and generating new patient growth. You know, right now, I imagine there's going to be a lot of patients that are looking for a new dentist. The unfortunate reality of, you know, what could happen during this time is, you know, sometimes these practices are unfortunately closing, or they're not open yet, right? They might be taking extra precautions. Maybe you're open and they need to get scheduled. So we want to make sure we have online presence and online visibility where new patients can find us. Always a great thing to focus on normally anyways. The reality for reviews, in my experience, is that it's not the review count anymore that matters. It's you know, it's not even the score. It's what are the most recent reviews say. So, you know, I don't know, this is just personally for me, I sort by recent, and that's what I check. Sometimes there's been ownership changes for certain businesses, and you start to see those reviews be reflected on that. So this is something that you kind of always have to stay on top of. And thankfully with RevenueWell, it's automated. So whether it's an email, whether it's a text message, we're going to send out communication after a patient's appointment and ask them to write a review. The real hurdle with collecting reviews is that, specifically for Google, which is where most practices want to find their review, is that you have to be logged in and you have to be a Gmail user to write that review. There's nothing we can do, unfortunately, to get around that hurdle, but we can make it easier for those users to get those reviews written. So the email that goes out is going to be fairly straightforward. Thanks for coming in. Do you mind writing an online review? When you click this button, the call to action at the bottom is going to bring you to a page that looks like this. And this is customizable for your practice. So some practices are going to just have Google. Some will have Google, Yelp, and Facebook. Google and Facebook, you can pick which ones we're helping promote. More likely than not, I'm going to get this email on my phone. I have Gmail on my phone like so many others. I very rarely am going to open this in a computer. And I'm always logged in. That's really the key. So if I got this email or text message, I click Google, it's going to auto log me in and bring me directly to your practice's Google My Business page and show me the stars and let me start writing that review. So it's just 2 clicks. It's the fastest that we can find to get patients where they need to be to start writing that review. We know if it bounces out of different windows, forces them to log in, there's too many hoops to jump through, they're just not going to write that review. We know how busy they can be, and we're asking for additional time, so we want to make it as efficient as possible. So with this request, it's 2 clicks, we're writing reviews immediately. And with a campaign like reviews being turned on, you're certainly going to start to see your review count climb. And that's really its intended goal. Pretty straightforward. We want to get more reviews. The reality is, though, that's going to be running in the background, just like so much of RevenueWell's communication. The feedback tab is where you kind of monitor that. So we know it's sending out review requests, but who's actually responding? Well, we're going to see our public profiles, and we're going to be able to kind of just gauge, okay, look, we're getting an increased score and more reviews on Google, great. But we can actually see the individualized emails as well. So what I really love is Alex here wrote a 5-star review on Google. This is great, very positive first experience, did exactly what we were hoping a patient would do, write a 5-star review on Google, and kind of went in depth as far as the review. What I would always recommend is, and it just takes 1 click, is to feature this review. So the reality is we never really know where a new patient is going to find us online. Is it going to be our website? Is it going to be our Facebook page, our Google My Business link? We want to make sure we have all of our bases covered, and some of those reviews aren't going to be deficient. So featuring this review is going to allow you to have this review also hosted on your website, your Facebook page, and then we have a microsite, kind of a mini website that every practice that uses RevenueWell has. It's hosted on PatientConnect365.com. So it'll also go to your Patient Connect profile page as well. And that way, this 1 Google review is actually on 4 locations online. This is great for online presence. This is great for SEO, being connected to Patient Connect 365. This just covers as many bases as we can with 1 review, and it's just 1 click from the practice's perspective. So I always say if there's a 4 or 5-star review, definitely feature it. If you were to look at like an active RevenueWell customers account, you would see just a long list of yeses, because they're going to feature almost every review. Most of the time, they're getting very positive reviews, so it only benefits you to click yes and feature it. So that's really the only workflow you'd have to do once you are sending those communications out, and it just makes it that much easier to see more patients come in through the door. I mean, that's really the goal of reviews, right? We want to see new patients. Of course, we track that as well. So, the ability to have this automated and the ability to make it easy for patients is really, I think, a winner for everybody. I know we're kind of approaching time limit here, Steve, so you kind of let me know if there's any other specifics we want to go into. The reality is RevenueWell has a ton of features, and we probably covered maybe half. I could probably talk for 8 hours on what RevenueWell can do and how it can help, but kind of curious to see if there's any specifics we'd like to focus on.
Yeah, no, Mike, I appreciate it. I think what you've covered is pretty good. The one thing, so I did a poll, and it looks like a majority of the users are using Lighthouse. Is there what? And you did cover some of this, so I don't want to make it seem as if you have to go over it again. But what are some of the differences between Lighthouse and RevenueWell? And just talk briefly over that. You don't have to go in depth. I know you covered some of it, but just some of the differences between those 2 systems.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that certainly the clinical communications is always at the forefront of my mind as far as if you're using Lighthouse, what's the main difference? Our ability to read those dental codes goes a long way. The digital post-op instructions and the treatment plan follow-up and the custom campaigns. Those are ways that we're going to use and leverage our technology to make your communication that much better. It's really, for RevenueWell, it's not sufficient to just send out generic communication. We know that's not effective. That might have worked 15 or 20 years ago. It does not work anymore. In fact, it might have worked 5 years ago. But patients and people are becoming very, very tech savvy, and we kind of can spot those emails that are not personalized. And RevenueWell wants to really maintain that connection between patient and doctor and close that gap between, how do we leverage technology to communicate? So that's one way for sure, is the clinical communications. I think just the fact that we added virtual office weeks into COVID-19 shows you what kind of software we have and how our response is to certain situations. We knew we needed to launch something really quickly, and we knew what that goal was because we're only operating in the dental industry as a company. So just being, really have our finger on the pulse, have a development team in place that's really not only really great at what they do, but very fast. I know Steve can attest to this. The amount of features they launched in the past 60 days has been unbelievable. It's a lot of learning on our end to kind of make sure we understand what these campaigns and what this functionality does. But it just really speaks to RevenueWell as far as, what should you expect as a customer. It's going to be not a stagnant product that necessarily stays the same. It's going to be, how do we adapt and use this in the new landscape, not just for 2020 and post COVID-19, but this is a theme that we've had for years. For the 4 years I've been here is, what does the industry look like? How is communication changing? What are our practices that are using RevenueWell asking for, and trying to make adaptations and changes to our platform to make it better?
That's good. I appreciate that. Rob was asking, Rob, is this a question? I just want to make sure. Or were you making a statement?
No, I was wondering if you could briefly go over creating custom form as an example. That ADA pre-screen for COVID, I think, is a really good example that's certainly relevant for all practices right now as we're evaluating what's our patient flow look like.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure.
So let me click on the patient forms, and yeah, Rob, you kind of hit the nail on the head. The ability to build these forms was always great, but for something like COVID-19, this is extremely beneficial because we probably, I think every practice is going to start having a template questionnaire, or a questionnaire, I should say, to pre-screen patients that are going to come in. And I think it's a nice peace of mind for a lot of patients as well to know that their practice is asking these questions. So RevenueWell has a forms builder, and it really sky's the limit as far as what kind of content you want to share and how you want to build the form. So let me click on the Forms tab here, and I'm just going to kind of quickly go through how easy it can be, and it's certainly very customizable. The forms that are provided from RevenueWell with our Forms product are health history, insurance info, and patient info. These are customizable. I can edit these forms the way they exist now and change whether certain things are visible or required. But for COVID-19, even HIPAA compliance forms, office policies, financial consent, what you do is you just have to name, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this, COVID-19 questionnaire, and then you kind of drag and drop. So I'm going to put questionnaire, COVID-19 questionnaire, and for the most part, it seems like there's going to be a lot of yes, no, multiple choice, short answer questions. So all you have to do is kind of drag and drop these yes, no questions. And this might say, have you, whatever it might be, whatever question you're thinking of, have you been exposed to COVID-19? Have you, been tested? Whatever I honestly don't know the questions that we're going to screen for, but you would type them in here and give the choices. In this case, yes or no. Do we want to make it required? Once we have the questions filled out, all I have to do is add a signature at the bottom. So I really just build a form. As long as you have your questions kind of ready to go, you type them in, you put a signature at the bottom. You always have the option to preview this form before you save it, so you know what it's going to look like from the patient's perspective. I don't have a ton of information in here, of course, but you can see it's going to ask for patient information. I just wrote have you, but you'll see your questions, yes, no. Okay, let me put yes, no. If yes, please explain. No, no. Perfect. Let me type my name in to sign it, hit next, and submit. So this isn't a live form yet, but it is a great way to see what the patient's perspective would be before we save it. And then once you're done and you like what it looks like, all you have to do is click create form, and this is going to be a new form for your patients to be able to fill out. Now, we can have this publicly visible on your patient or your practice's forms page, or like before, I can copy this link, and I might know Mike's coming in. He has his appointment. Hey, Mike, before you step foot in the office, before you we start your appointment, let's just have you fill out this COVID-19 questionnaire if you don't mind. Patient can then fill it out on their phone, and that way we have that in your patient communication system before, or excuse me, your practice management software before the patient steps foot in the office.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Last thing, if you could just run down quickly some pricing. just over some of the products that you covered. I did post Mike's contact information in the chat, so if you wanted to contact him directly, he's available to do demos like this. If you want to show other people in the practice or doctor in the practice, he's able to do this and show that stuff. There it is as well. So absolutely feel free to give him a call, email, whatever is easiest, and he can connect with you and do a screen share like this and kind of go through some of those questions and show the product. Typically on those demos, it is a little bit more interactive where he's asking some questions and trying to get a feel for your practice. The reason we do it that way is obviously every practice is different. And so we don't want to take RevenueWell and say, use it this way. We want it to be adaptable to what your practice does and how you communicate with your patients. And so he's able to do that with you. It's a little bit more interactive of an experience. So again, if you have any questions or want to reach out to him directly, feel free to do that. Other than that, Mike, why don't you just wrap us up by just quickly going over some of the pricing, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So thankfully, the pricing is very easy to remember and transparent with RevenueWell. So, and we try to make it as easy as possible for you. So RevenueWell is month to month. We have no sign-up fees, no cancellation fees, anything like that. RevenueWell itself is $339, and Forms is an add-on for RevenueWell. That's $79. So that's $339 a month plus $79 if you were to do Forms, $418 total. And that gets you everything that we looked at today: the messenger platform, the ability to do teledentistry, the ability to create forms and send them out to your patients, treatment plan follow-up, custom campaigns. Literally everything we looked at today is all encompassed for that $418 total. So it's thankfully pretty easy. The onboarding is, I usually say, if you wanted to get up and running as quick as 5 days is usually the turnaround that we can accommodate, depending on your availability, of course. But we just set up 2 dates: installation and training. Install syncs to your practice management software remotely, thankfully. And the training, of course, will accommodate whoever you'd like to join. We've had multiple staff members on a Zoom call to do that, especially now. So we'll get you, up and running as quick as we can, and it's straightforward pricing for RevenueWell.
Something I'd like to throw in there, if I may, as a benefit for the Getsy Dental customers that are on the call today, you'll also get RevenueWell, including Forms, at no charge for the first 30 days. So you get a full month to test drive this. And like Mike said, because it's a month to month, if you don't like it, you can shut it off and walk away. So I just, I want to highlight a couple of things that you went over. It's the relevant and compassionate patient communication piece that really makes RevenueWell sing, because it can read the patient codes. It knows, as an example, if you want to send out a campaign about implants, it may or may not make sense to send that to your entire patient base. But because it reads the codes, it can hyper-target just those patients who have a missing tooth indicated in their chart. So your patients are only getting that communication through those custom campaigns that is most relevant to them. And that's just one really simple example, but it runs the gamut, and you have so much control over how you're interacting and communicating with and engaging with your patients with this tool for, a very, very reasonable price.
Yeah, and Rob, we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about RevenueWell. I've been with the company for about 4 years, and I love the fact that it is month to month. It's one thing to kind of spit out statistics and give you numbers, but we allow our system to kind of back that up, and we show you the numbers. We're really transparent with the patients that are being brought in and the revenue that's being generated, because we feel like we should earn your business monthly, and that's one of the things I love about RevenueWell. We're not going to try to hook you into a contract or lure you up front with a low cost and then jack up the price. We're all about just transparency and trying to do right by the practice. And we realize every practice is unique and different, and so we respect that. And that's why we do offer so many different tools within RevenueWell, so that you're able to customize it to what your practice needs are. But with that, I want to let everybody offline here so you can begin to enjoy your weekend. Hopefully you have a little bit better weather than we have up here. But we appreciate all your time and thank you. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to work with you and connect and just answer what questions you may or may not have. So again, thank you for your time, and we hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
everybody.